Throughout history, a major component of successful fights for independence has been the presence of a strong leader, or someone who has guided others to victory. The most significant guides are those who leave an important legacy behind them. However, powerful leaders do not just exert their power, but also teach the reasoning behind their motives and inspire their people to stand up for justice. Leaders of rebellions have different tactics on defiance. Some choose violence, others choose boycotts. However, the most successful protests tend to be peaceful. This idea of a violence-free protest can be traced back to the Indian movement for independence, which started in 1857 and lasted until 1947. During this movement, a man named Mohandas Gandhi led India to independence from the British Empire. Gandhi's ideas unified the Indian nation, and his actions were key in leading the Indian nation to independence without the use of violence, while leaving a lasting legacy of a structure for successful, peaceful protests for future leaders to come. India became affiliated with Britain in the 1600s when the British East India Company set up trading posts at Bombay, Madras, and Calcutta. India became more and more valuable to the British because of their resources, and was essential in providing Britain with raw materials. People became upset under British rule, but in 1815, the British had taken control of most of their land, were trying to convert them to Christianity, and were racist. As India was formerly a land with separate civilizations and no unity, the British easily conquered it, and could count on ethnic, linguistic, social, and dynastic fragmentation to keep the people of India from taking back their land. Through racism, the British segregated the Muslims and the Hindus, making religious unity almost impossible and keeping the country divided. Indians became the second-class citizens. They were barred from top posts in the Indian civil service, and those who managed to get middle-level jobs were paid less than the Europeans. Indians were distraught over the treatment they were receiving. The first bid for independence came in 1857 with the Sepoy Rebellion, an unsuccessful revolt in New Delhi. In 1885, the British government took control of the Indian National Congress, using it to educate the people of India on British Raj, or British rule, through civic and political dialogue. Meanwhile, Gandhi spent 3 years in England earning his law degree. He then traveled to Africa in 1893 to work for a firm in Durban, South Africa. 10 years after arriving in Durban, Gandhi traveled to Joburg, having started developing his philosophy that would impact the Indian people in the future. In 1914, Gandhi traveled to India, where tension had transgressed. The Indian national movement had become a fight for independence from British rule with the goal of developing their own system of government. In fact, it is the only historical example of a democratic government being completely recreated. Gandhi formed his ideas from his surroundings. He practiced law in London, becoming a remarkably successful lawyer who strove for the expansion of legal rights among his clients. In this job, he learned how to fight for justice through the specifics of law. During a train ride to Pretoria in 1893, Gandhi, who had a first-class ticket, was ordered to leave the white-only first-class train and move to third class. When he refused, he was thrown off the train. Gandhi later described the epiphany he had experienced during the journey. The hardship to which I was subjected was superficial, only a symptom of the deep disease of colored prejudice. I should try, if possible, to root out the disease and suffer hardships in the process. Redress for the wrongs I should seek only to the extent that would be necessary for the removal of color prejudice. He read the Gita, Upanishads, Tolstoy, Thoreau, and the Bible, which developed his stance on governance and nonviolent protesting and affected his ideas regarding the principles of freedom and religious tolerance. Gandhi's time in London analyzing Western civilization led him to realize he would rather see a country honest than prosperous and dishonest. After returning from hospital work in London due to the Great War, Gandhi noticed a bill prohibiting Indians the right to vote was being considered by the Natal Legislative Assembly. His campaign to stop this bill from passing failed, but drew attention to the injustice in India. Because of this injustice, Gandhi founded the Natal Indian Congress, a reconstruction of the Indian National Congress suiting the needs of Natal Indians and dedicated not only to politics but to the moral and social uplift of its members. He made the Indian community in South Africa into political force, publishing documents on the grievances of India. Gandhi owned Indian Opinion, a journal that expressed the grievances of South Africa, and he ran the International Printing Press, which he used to get his ideas on politics, religion, and society out. During Gandhi's 20 years away from India, he established his philosophy of satyagraha, the idea of nonviolent resistance. In 1907, the Asiatic Order was passed, a law forcing all non-whites to carry passes or else risk deportation. This act influenced Gandhi to put his ideas on passive resistance into practice. Later, in 1913, Gandhi led the Great March with over 2,000 people in order to gain Indian rights in South Africa. Gandhi was arrested that night, but his followers continued to march on. When he was released, Gandhi began giving speeches in which he emphasized sanitation, education, and good conduct. Gandhi's time in South Africa and London was what influenced his morals and plan for the nonviolent Indian Revolution. He claimed that the greatest misfortune he saw was that the Englishmen were unaware of the crimes and consequences of their system. Gandhi planned to create a state within a state, to paralyze the government without actually harming the people. He believed in positive freedom, meaning people should possess the power and resources to fulfill one's own potential, as opposed to negative liberty, which is freedom from external restraint. Gandhi accomplished this in the form of Swaraj, meaning self-governance or self-rule. This concept was important to the Indian independence from foreign domination. Swaraj lays stress on governance, not by a hierarchical government, but through the idea of self-governance. Freedom of the individual is at the root of all progress. The focus was on political decentralization. I thus began to call the Indian movement Satyagraha, that is to say, the force which is born of truth and love, or nonviolence. Gandhi. In June of 1920, Gandhi began his nonviolent protests in India, starting them off with the non-cooperation movement. The central strategies of the movement were boycotts of government services and courts of law, surrender of people in public offices, withdrawal of children from government schools, boycotts of foreign goods, liquor and opium trade, and the furtherance of Hindu-Muslim friendship. All of this was done nonviolently. The non-cooperation movement was ended when Gandhi learned it was headed towards violence. Gandhi had a different set of abilities than most political leaders, being charismatic and a good fundraiser and organizer. He was diligent, meticulous, and efficient. Through Gandhi's revolutionary personality, he was able to provide social remedies for the people of India. He organized the Indian masses to come together as one to go against the oppressive government. Through Gandhi's compelling charm and dedication to the movement, he inspired the public, raising money and adopting more people. Gandhi's ideas and personal characteristics were what launched the movement into action and led to the overall success of the Indian independence movement. In March 1930, Gandhi led a group of followers on a march to Dandi to collect salt water, then obtain salt by evaporation as a protest against the salt tax. This was called the Salt Satyagraha. He was arrested in May, but the march still continued on and ended with his release from jail. Over 80,000 Indians were arrested, but the movement gained media attention, causing thousands to join the nonviolent fight for independence. Foreign journalists reported on the passive resistance of the Indians and the violent retaliation of the British, causing international criticism of Britain. The Satyagraha way of protest proved to be effective, as Gandhi had inspired the Indian people to rise up against the British rule through peace instead of violent protests. Unlike any previous country, India was able to gain independence through peaceful means due to Gandhi's leadership. India gained full independence in 1947, when Gandhi was 78 years old. Gandhi's use of a nonviolent and uncorruptive revolution rocked the British Empire, as they were shocked at the rapid speed that the revolution progressed at. A new flag for India was created that represented Indian defiance against foreign rule, portrayed by a floor charkha. Gandhi brought about the idea of self-efficiency and independence through the charkha. Gandhi, on January 30th of 1948, at the age of 78, was assassinated on his way to deliver his daily prayer meeting message by a Hindu of the Maharatha tribe in Pune, a tribe that was against Gandhi's teachings. There was confusion about what direction the newly independent India would go in without their leader and the main contributor to peace in the nation. There was a concern that Gandhi's ideas may not stay present in India without him. However, Gandhi's teachings ended up having an enormous impact on the world's view of protesting and movements. Gandhi's greatest legacy is the structure he created for passive resistance. Through this legacy, other leaders have prospered. Leaders like Martin Luther King, who took the idea of nonviolent protests from Gandhi's work in the Indian Revolution movement as a way to stand up for civil rights. I found the nonviolent resistance philosophy of Gandhi. I came to feel that this was the only morally and practically sound method open to oppressed people in their struggle for freedom. Cesar Chavez modeled many tactics after those of Gandhi, including boycotts and hunger strikes. He was quoting on saying, "Not only did he talk about nonviolence, he showed how nonviolence works for justice and liberation." Outside of the United States, Gandhi has influenced leaders like Nelson Mandela, the Dalai Lama, imprisoned Burmese Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi, and Guatemalan Nobel Peace Prize winner Rigoberta Menchú, who have all said that Gandhi has been a leading light for them. Movements inspired by Gandhi's teachings have toppled dictators like Ferdinand Marcos in the Philippines in 1986 and Augusto Pinochet in Chile in 1989. Also, they have taken down communist regimes in Eastern Europe in the late 1890s and Slobodan Milosevic in Yugoslavia in 2000. Gandhi's legacy has inspired many influential leaders and movements, and will stand as an example for leaders to come of how to succeed in protests and movements without the use of violence.